Okay, so this is going to be the second part of the key to section 6.3 part A. So this is going to be number 6. So number 6, we have 16y squared minus 20y minus 6. So 16y squared minus 20y minus 6. Now, the GCF here, if you go back to the first five, the GCF was 1. In all of these cases, the GCF was 1. Now, here, number 6, we have the GCF no longer being 1. The GCF here is 2 in this particular case. So you want to factor out a 2 first. So when I factor out the 2, I'm going to get 2 times 8y squared minus 2 times negative 10y is a negative 20y, and then 2 times a negative 3 is a negative 6. All right, now, I'm going to cover up the GCF right now. You see this trinomial? That GCF, if I just look at this, not this, but just this right here, the GCF is 1. So what I would do now is see if I can factor this as right here as 2 binomials. But don't forget, the GCF2 is going to be part of your final answer, whatever this may be. Now, it may turn out that you can't factor this any further, in which case that would be the answer. But in number 6, you're going to get 2 binomials here. All right, so let's go off to the side. I'm going to go off to the side here and rewrite this trinomial. So 8y squared minus 10y minus 3. And then the 2 binomials. And again, we're going to use FOIL to help us. All right, FOIL and trial and error. Okay, so let's do the F first. So first times first is going to be 8y squared. So I need 2 factors of 8y. So there's 4y times 2y. And there's 8y times y. Let's try the 4y and the 2y first and see what happens. So let's put 4y here, 2y here. So far, we're okay. 4y times 2y is 8y squared. If that doesn't work, if at the end it doesn't work, we'll maybe change it to 8y and y instead. All right, now, the last sign is negative 3. All right, the last sign is negative 3. Now, I'm sorry, the last term is negative 3. The sign's negative, so that means that these signs in here are going to be different. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. All right, but we're going to do that at the end. So that's where we're going to look at the outer and we're going to look at the inner to help us determine what these signs need to be. All right, but let's look at the absolute value of this for right now. The absolute value of a negative 3 is 3. So I'm going to look at 2 numbers whose product is 3. 2 factors of 3. So the only possibilities are 3 and 1. So for right now, let's just put the 3 here and the 1 there and see what happens. Okay? So remember, the last sign's negative, so these signs have to be different. So let's see if these are the correct order, though. So let's look at the outer. The outer is 4y. The inner is 6y. Okay? Now be careful. Don't say, well, 6 plus 4 is 10 and make both of these negative. That's not going to work. Be careful because a negative 3 times a negative 1 is a positive 3 and I wanted a negative 3. So don't make that mistake. All right, don't make a mistake. So I'm going to rewrite it. So that's 4y. That's 2y. And we put a 3 here and the 1 there. All right, so let's see what we get. The outer is 4y. The inner is 6y. Now remember what we discussed. The last sign's negative. So that means one's positive, one's negative. So the larger of these, 6y, will take the middle sign. So that needs to be negative. But before we go on putting any signs in here, add these up. A negative 6y and a positive 4y is a negative 2y, and that is not what I wanted. I wanted a negative 10y. So that didn't work. So maybe switching the 3 and the 1, let's see what happens. So let's rewrite it here. 4y, 2y. We're going to put the 1 here, the 3 there. All right, let's look at the outer and inner now. The outer is 12y. The inner is 2y. Remember, the signs are going to be different because this is negative. A negative times a positive is a negative. The larger of this, 2y and 12y, which is 12y, will take the middle signs. That means this has to be negative, this has to be positive. And before I put the signs, let's add them up and make sure we get that negative 10y. So 2y and negative 12y is a negative 10y, so that's correct. So that's the correct order. So now I've got to put the signs. If I want the outer to be a negative 12y, that means this right here has to be negative. If I want the inner to be a positive 2y, that means this is positive. So I'm going to get 4y plus 1 times 2y minus 3, and that goes here. So don't forget though, the answer is going to be the GCF. Always remember the GCF. So it'll be 2 times 4y plus 1 times 2y minus 3. All right, so that's number 6. So number 6, you're going to have 2 times 4y plus 1 times 2y minus 3. All right, let's look at number 7. Okay, number 7, you have 12x cubed minus 57x squared minus 15x. So 12x cubed minus 57x squared minus 15x. All right, now you may need a calculator to help you with this, but if you look at the 12, the 57, and the 15, let's see if, now remember this is even odd, so don't use 6, because 6 is divisible by 2, so these would have to be divisible by 2. Let's see if 3 will go to all of these and see if 3 is a GCF. So 3 goes into 12, 3 goes into negative 15, and 3 goes into negative 57. So it looks like so far my GCF is 3. And then if you notice, there's an x in every term. So I'm going to have x here, but I'm going to need how many of them? How many factors of x? This is 3, this is 2, this is 1. So you're going to need the 1 factor of x. You always use a 1 with the smallest exponent. So there's my GCF. My GCF is 3x. So we're going to say 3x times. So 3x times 4x squared, 3x times 4x squared is 12x cubed, minus, all right, let's see, 57 divided by 3, 57 divided by 3 equals 19. So that's minus 19x. 3 times a negative 19 is a negative 57. X times x is x squared. And then minus 3x times 5 is negative 15x. So 3x times a negative 5 is a negative 15x. Okay, so now I'm going to cover the GCF, and you can ask yourself, can I factor this any further? Well, first of all, the GCF here is 1. So let's go and see if I can factor this as 2 binomials. If I can't, then that will be the answer right here. That will be the answer. But you can. This is factorable further, so let's figure out what this is. So I'm going to rewrite 4x squared minus 19x minus 5, and I'm going to do the same stuff I did here. Okay, so let's see what we get. So there are 2 possibilities of 4x squared. There's 2x times 2x, 4x times 1. Let's try 4x times x first. So let's put the 4x here, the x there. All right. Now again, the last sign's negative, so these signs in here are going to be different. One's positive, one's negative. We're going to do that at the end when we do the outer and the inner. But look at the 5. Now, keep in mind that if someone asks you what's the last term is a negative 5. The constant is a negative 5. But let's look at the absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. Now, so there's only one possibility for the 2 factors whose product is 5, and that's 5 times 1. So if I put the 5 here and the 1 there, let's see what happens. So let's see if these are the correct order of these terms. So the outer is 4x, the inner is 5x. Remember, the last sign is negative, so that means one's positive, one's negative. The larger of these, so the 5x takes that middle sign. And right away you know that's not correct, because negative 5x and 4x is a negative x, and I needed a negative 19. So that didn't work. So maybe switching the 5 and the 1. Let's see what happens. So let's put again 4x and then x. So this time we're going to say 5 here, 1 there. So let's see what happens. The outer is 20x this time. 4x times 5 is 20x. The inner is x. The larger of these will take that middle sign, so that's negative. And this works because notice a positive x and a negative 20x is a negative 19x, and that's what you wanted. So that means that if I want the outer to be negative 20x, then that means this is negative. If I wanted the inner to be a positive x, then that has to be a plus symbol. So positive, so 4x plus 1. So those two factors go here. So my answer is going to be 3x times 4x plus 1 times x minus 5. All right. Now, it didn't matter whether you said 3x times x minus 5 times 4x plus 1. Did not matter. All right. But we tend to put the monomial part at the beginning. All right. Okay. So that's the answer number 7. So number 7, we're going to say 3x. Don't forget the GCF. GCF is always part of your final answer because it is a factor. So 3x times 4x plus 1 times x minus 5. All right, so let's look at number 8. So number 8, we have 6x squared plus xy, so number 8, minus 15y squared. Okay, so this time we have two variables. So it's not that bad. It's pretty easy. The GCF here is 1, so we're going to go directly to the two binomials. All right, so listen carefully. So using FOIL and trial and error. So give me two factors whose product is 6x squared. Let's try 3x and 2x. So let's put 3x here, 2x here. If that doesn't work, we may switch them, or we may have to use 6x and x. All right, now here's where the y squared comes in. See how this is y squared out here? So I need two terms whose product, two terms whose product is a negative 15y squared. Well, if I want a y squared, then I need a y and a y. Okay, so that part I know. Now let's look at the negative 15. These coefficients of y's, that product will have to be a negative 15. But since this is negative, remember one's positive, one's negative. So we're going to take care of that at the end, though. So let's look at the absolute value of this. So let's look at 15 instead. There are a couple possibilities of 15. So 5 times 3, 15 times 1. Let's try 5 and 3 first. Let's put the 5 with this one and the 3 with this one. And the reason I'm saying this is this. Remember what our discussion was. Remember what we said. So I'm going to go over here and then remind you about this. Let me just rewrite the original over. If I put the 3 here, you know that the 3y cannot go here because this binomial, then I can factor out a 3. They have a 3 in both of those. All right. So if that's the case, then that means that every term here is divisible by 3, and it's not because that's a 1. Okay. So always remember what we discussed before. So it can't be that. So the 3 has to go here, and the 5 has to go here, but that still may not be correct. Let's see if these terms are in the correct order. So the outer is 9y. The inner is, the outer 3x times 3y is 9xy. The inner 5y times 2x is 10xy. Remember, the last sign is negative, so that means one of these is negative, one of these is positive. The larger one, 10xy, will take that middle sign. So that's the positive one, and that's the negative one. All right, and when I add them up, a positive 10xy and a negative 9xy is a positive xy, and that's what you wanted. So these terms are in the correct order. I just got to put the signs in the correct place. So if I want the outer to be negative, and that means this has to be negative. If I want the inner to be positive, that means this has to be the positive, so the plus symbol. All right, so there's your answer right here. Okay, so I get for number 8, I'm going to get 3x plus 5y times 2x minus 3y. And again, right here. And again, always check your work. Use a FOIL. 3x times 2x is 6x squared. So far I'm okay. The outer 3x times a negative 3y is a negative 9xy. The inner 5y times 2x is a negative 10xy. And the last, a positive 5y times a negative 3y is a negative 15y squared. Combining like terms, I get 6x squared. Negative 9xy and a positive 10xy is a positive xy, and then minus 15y squared, and that is what you wanted. Okay, so let's look at number 9. All right, so number 9. Again, notice we have two variables. It could be the same way. Okay, so number 9, I have 9m squared minus 13mn plus 4n squared. All right, now the GCF is 1, so I'm going to go directly to the two binomials. GCF is 1. I'm going to use FOIL and then trial and error. So let's do the F first. So two factors of 9m squared. So let's try 3m and 3m. Let's see what happens. If that doesn't work, we'll try 9m and m. All right, now you see how the last term has an n squared, so that means I'm going to need an n and an n, because n times n is going to be that n squared. You see how that last sign's positive? So that's going to be the easy kind. That's the easy kind, because if the last sign's positive, then that means that these signs in here are the same. Either they're both positive or they're both negative. Well, if I want the middle term to be negative, then that means they're both negative. All right? Now let's look at the 4. So I can remember the possibilities for 4 are 2 times 2, 4 times 1. Let's try 2 and 2. Let's put this as 2 and this as 2. So we get, so 3m minus 2n, 3m minus 2n. All right, now before we check our work, let's check the F and the L again. 3m times 3m is 9m squared. A negative 2n times a negative 2n is a positive 4n squared. All right, so F and L work, but we did not check the outer and the inner. You got to check the outer and the inner. So the outer 3n, m rather, times a negative 2n is a negative 6mn. Put in alphabetical order. A negative 2n times a positive 3m is a negative 6mn. Combined like terms, I get a negative 12mn, which is not what I wanted. So that's not correct. All right. So let's try something else. Let's keep the 3m's the same. 3m, but instead of using 2 and 2, let's use 4 and 1. Let's see what happens. So let's put the 4 here and the 1 there. All right, let's see what happens. And again, the last sign's positives. Don't forget that's an n. 4n and 1n. So just put an n here because the one's understood to be there. Again, the last sign's positive, so these have to be the same sign in here, and they're both negative. Now notice when I do that, I get a negative. The outer 3m times a negative n is a negative 3mn. The inner, a negative 4n times a positive 3m is a negative 12mn. But here's the issue. When I add them up, I get a negative 15mn, which is not what I wanted. I wanted a negative 13mn. So maybe instead of using 3m and 3m, then I use 9m and m. So let's try 9m and m instead. All right, and let's do the 2 and the 2 and see what happens. Actually, let's use the 4 and the 1. Let's do the 4 and the 1. Okay, so I need an n and an n because n times n is going to be that n squared I need. And let's say, oh, and don't forget the last sign's positive. So that means that these signs in here are going to both be subtraction. They'll both be negative. So let's say this is the 4 here and this is the 1 here. So I get 9m minus 4n times m minus n. But you got to check your work. Don't assume that that's correct. So let's go and check using FOIL. 9m times m is 9m squared. So the F is good. Let's do the L. A negative 4n times a negative n is a positive 4n squared. So that's what I wanted. Now let's do the out and the inner. The outer is a 9m times a negative n is a negative 9mn. The inner, a negative 4n times a positive m is a negative 4mn. And when I add them up, I get a negative 13mn, which is what I wanted. So this is the correct answer right here. All right. So in number 9, we're going to say 9m minus 4n times m minus n. Oops, right here. 9m minus 4n times m minus n. So that's number 9. All right, and then finally number 10, we have 12xy cubed minus 14xy squared plus 4xy. Okay, so if you look at this, the GCF of the coefficients, 12, negative 14, and 4 is 2. If you look at the variables, there's an x in every term, x to the first, x to the first, x to the first, so I'm going to need an x. There's not a y in every, oh, there is a y in every term. So there's a y in every term, so I have a y cubed, a y squared, and a y. Remember, you're going to take out the one with the smallest exponent, so I'm going to take out a y. So my GCF is 2xy. So that's your GCF. So I'm going to factor out a 2xy, and then let's see what we get here. So if I have 3 terms, I need 3 terms in here. 2xy times 6y squared, 2xy times 6y squared is 12xy cubed, minus 2xy times a negative 7y, 2xy times a negative 7y is a negative 14xy squared. So 2 times a negative 7 is negative 14. Y times y is y squared, and you have that x. Plus 2xy times 2 will give me 4xy. 2 times 2 is 4. 2xy times 2 is 4xy. All right. Now let's try and see if I can factor this trinomial. Don't forget, your GCF is part of the answer. So let's see what we get. So I'm going to go off to the side. I'm going to rewrite this trinomial right here. So 6y squared minus 7y plus 2 and the 2 binomials, and see what we get. All right. So possibilities of 6y squared would be 6yy or 3y2y. Let's try the 3y2y, see what happens. The last sign's positive, so these signs in here are going to be the same. They're both going to be negative. So minus, minus. The possibility for 2 is 2 and 1. That's the only possibility. But remember, you cannot put the 2 here. If you put the 2 here, that means I can factor out a 2 from here. So if I put the 2 here, I'm going to go ahead and put the 2 just to show you. That means I can factor out a 2, and I get 2 times y minus 1. So if I factor out a 2 here, that means that all of these are divisible by 2, and it's not because negative 7 is not divisible by 2. So that can't be right. So always check, always think about that. So that was 2y. So that means I'm going to, and they were both subtraction. So that means I'm going to put the 2 here, the 1 there. All right, so let's check. Don't assume that's your answer. You got to check. 3y times 2y using FOIL. 3y times 2y is 6y squared. The last, a negative 2 times a negative 1 is a positive 2. Now let's check the outer and the inner. The outer is 3y times a negative 1 is a negative 3y, the outer. The inner, a negative 2 times 2y is a negative 4y. When I add these up, I get a negative 7y, and that's what I wanted. So this right here, when I factor this, I get this. But don't say that's your answer to the original polynomial. The original polynomial, remember, is this, not this. So in the original polynomial, you factor out a 2xy, so that has to be part of the answer. So this right here, the 2 factors go here. So I'm going to get 3y minus 2 times 2y minus 1. And that's the answer for number 10. So number 10, you're going to have 2xy, that your GCF, because your GCF is a factor, times 3y minus 2 times 2y minus 1. Okay, so that's the end of this part of the